Friends from the Center of Excellence in Advanced Manufacturing Technology at IIT Kharagpur, I'd like to welcome you in this mega webinar series, which we have started in March 2021, and today is the 34th week. We are discussing about the various topics and aspects of the manufacturing, covering fields like additive manufacturing, Industry 4.0, automation, design and automation, materials. We had the speakers from different universities across the globe and also from the industry. Today we are very fortunate to have Arjun Malhotra with us, and we'll be listening to him about his experience, past experience regarding the entrepreneurship, and the topic which has been decided for discussion today is that scope and opportunities for entrepreneurship in product design and manufacturing. So far, we have conducted the webinar series in the form of a PPT presentation, and today we thought that if we interact more, it is more of a discussions and all, and better will be our understanding, and better we'll get to know about his past experience in this area. Arjun Malhotra is a pioneer of the Indian IT industries. Mr. Malhotra served as the chairman of Headstrong Board of Directors before its acquisition by Genpact in May 2011. Prior to Headstrong, he was Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of TechSpan, which merged with Headstrong in October 2003. Mr. Malhotra has a long string of entrepreneurial success. He has co-founded the HCL Group in 1975, taking it from a 6-person garage operation to one of India's largest information technology corporations. The first leading Indian entrepreneur to relocate to USA, Mr. Malhotra took over HCL's US operation, now known as HCL Technologies, in 1989. And grew to it nearly $100 million annual revenues. In 1992, he ran the HCL-HP joint venture in India, and in 1996, he set up and ran the joint venture with Deluxe Corporation. Mr. Malhotra is on the board of governors of ISB Hyderabad and IIT Kharagpur Foundation. He is a past co-chair of the Global Pan IIT Alumni Association. He is also a member of IPSS and was on the board of governors of the Doon School. A life fellow of IIT Kharagpur, he has been awarded Doctor of Science honoris causa in September 2012. The Punjab Technology University conferred an honorary PhD on him in 2013. He is the chartered member of TIE, having previously served as the chairman of their global board. Mr. Malhotra studied at the Doon School, Dehradun, graduated from IIT Kharagpur with BTech Honours in Electronics and Electrical Communication Engineering, and received Dr. B.C. Rai Gold Medal. In 1985, he attended the Advanced Management Program of the Harvard Business School. He was awarded the Albert Einstein Technology Medal in 2001. The Institute of Engineers India has named Mr. Malhotra an eminent engineering personality. For his contributions to the Indian IT industry, he got the DQ Lifetime Achievement Award. He is presently an advisor in a number of startups in education and healthcare space. So you can see that the vast experience, Mr. Malhotra has. There are a lot of questions to be coming up in the minds of the participants. The first thing which I am very eager to ask is that the Arjun, you have co-founded the HCL Group, taking 6 persons from the garage operations to one of the vibrant IT the corporations. So can you just share us about your experience, that how you took it forward from the the 6 persons to the the global industry, and what are the difficulties you faced, and what sort of challenges you faced, and how did you overcome that?
Thank you, Professor Paul. Thank you for that very kind introduction. Getting to the topic, I think basically what I would like to say, and that's really also the HCL story, is that when we first came out with the product, we actually looked at a market that we understood. So we really came from the market end, looked at which market is the one that we understood, what is the gap in that market, what is the product that they would need. And then we looked at technology at the back. Microprocessors were just coming out at that time. They were really the new technology. And what was available was a 4-bit microprocessor. So what we did was very simply made a desktop programmable calculator, which had 200 memories and 2000 steps. So basically you could invert a 3x3 matrix instead of having to go to a computer. And of course, do a lot of other programming like regression analysis, statistics, stuff like that. And build that programmable calculator. We called it a microcomputer in those days because really you could use the word computer fairly loosely. But I think what I wanted to talk about more importantly is when we moved into the commercial market. That's where we really were competing with people like IBM and ICL. ICL, for those who don't remember, was the big British company that was probably the largest competition for IBM all over the world. And they were selling computers in India. And so basically we decided, we looked at you have to go from the market end and you have to go from your environment. So India had a lot of power failures at that time. Power would fail regularly everywhere, cities, So what we did was, and what happens when you're running a computer and the power fails, again, we didn't, when you're running a small 8-bit machine, you don't want to buy, lakhs of rupees worth of UPS and batteries to support it. So basically what we thought was, and you're doing coding on a program in those days, BASIC or Fortran or COBOL or whatever. What happened was when the computer crashed during a power failure, recovering it became a very complex issue. And there weren't too many very good programmers who could do that. And so you'd end up getting a lot of calls for your maintenance people to come in and support them, basically from crashes. So what we did was we built what is called a power shutoff auto restart. And I mentioned that clearly because it was not a very sophisticated product. It was a fairly crude product. What we did was we used a truck battery, a lead acid battery, and connected it in the computer through microcode, basically through a PROM, programmable, where when the power failed, we maintained all the registers at a point where the failure happened. And when the power came back, the computer started exactly from the point where it failed. So now I could have a less intelligent or a less trained operator to work the computer, and which was one of the problems we had at that time. And that became a unique selling proposition for us. So what I want to mention is, excuse me, that you have to look at what the market needs, and then you have to come up with a product. I think the second thing I wanted to mention was, as you look at what the market needs, and I'll give a more, how should I put it, a more relevant and more up-to-date example. We have this pandemic. We are all talking about how not just school children, probably some college kids go back home where the network is not very good, where the connectivity is not very good, where power may not be available all the time. And so what we are looking at, or what the governments are looking at all over the world, especially in India, is to give them a tablet so that they can actually go online instead of trying to learn their lessons on a smartphone, which has a small screen. Now think of it, just look at this problem for India. I want to make a tablet that goes out to the rural areas. Now, what are my challenges? First thing is, my power failure can be for very long. So I need to have a replaceable battery, which means that I can charge one battery and use it like we had in the old cell phones, if some of you remember that. And so when my battery finishes, I take the charged battery and put it in. So if I was designing a product for the Indian rural market, in where the volumes are going to be really large as per what the government is saying today, I would make a replaceable battery instead of the way it's designed today, where everything is sealed. The second thing is, since this is going to go out in volume, I need to design the product so that it's maintainable in a remote area. So when I make the internal design, I have to make sure that it can be repaired in a remote area. And next thing is, I can't give a sealed product. I have to put some 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 screws, small screws at the back, so that someone can unscrew it, open it up, and replace it. It's very much like, I don't know how many of you drove the old Ambassador cars and the old Fiats. In those days, when the fan belt broke, you could replace it yourself. I've replaced it so many times. In the new cars, there's nothing you can do. I mean, you have to take it to a computer which gets plugged in, and then they tell you what's wrong. And so I think when you look at manufacturing or designing as an entrepreneur, you have to look at what the market wants you to do. I think we have a number of examples. I gave the power shutoff auto restart on the HCL 8C. I think, I can talk about something that's work that's being done or has been done, I should think, at IIT Kharagpur. So when the pandemic happened, if all of you remember, during the second wave, there was a massive oxygen shortage. And no matter what you did, by the time you got those oxygen concentrators or plants or whatever you need, I mean, there were a number of tragedies that happened, things you couldn't control, and now people seem to be in a much better position. But there was a simple solution that did exist. So it's something called an Ambu bag that people use. So basically, if you look at what it is, when there's a shortage of oxygen, if you can pump more air into your lungs, there's obviously more oxygen they can get because more air is being pumped into your lungs. So there's this medical bag that you can connect, which you can pump, and it pushes air into your lungs much more than you normally would breathe. Right? It's called an Ambu bag. Now, what does happen is you can keep pumping it, but after 5 minutes, your hand gets tired. 5-10 minutes, how many people are going to help you keep pumping that? So what IIT Kharagpur had done was put in two innovations. One is they put in a kind of something that you could operate with your foot that would pump the bag so that, and your foot doesn't get tired that quickly or that easily. And so that was one product that they developed. And the other was putting a motor on the bag, which obviously would make that happen. Simple things like that actually, if we ever have that problem again in the future, we hopefully will be able to, and this is not an expensive product. It can be made by anyone. It can be stored at home. It's just a bag with a valve, and it's a fairly simple product. But again, relevant to India that we talked about. I also give one more example of how design was done. There was this particular gentleman, I forget his name now. I think he was an IIT Delhi grad, came from a village many years ago. He went to his village and he saw a person come on a cycle with multiple wires hanging out. And then he put the cycle on his stand, got onto the cycle and started pedaling. And villagers came and plugged their phones into all those wires. And basically he was charging their phones by operating that cycle. And that's how he made his living. And so this gentleman from IIT Delhi, he looked at that and he said, if this is the problem in the village, then why would I make a slim line? Why do I have to make a slim phone? So at that time, he went to China and got a phone designed with a big battery. It was a little heavier to carry, and the form factor wasn't sleek, but it worked for something like 48 hours at full use and for 30 days in idling. And he picked up 8% of the market just providing that particular phone, right, in those days. So again, look at your market, when you design your product, design it for the market. Obviously, you've got to have the functionality and stuff, and design it for maintainability so that tomorrow, depending on how the market is structured, who's going to maintain it. I don't expect someone from a rural area to ship something to you in a city where you have your repair center and then you take 1 or 2 weeks and ship it back. You know, if the person's a school kid has to be learning, he doesn't have 2 weeks. He can go without the product. So you have to find a way of repairing it locally. In fact, the other thing I wanted to mention is when you design products, remember it's not always logic. Unfortunately, there is something in our market called fashion. And what is the fashion of the week? So ideally, if I had to make a product for, let's say, my kids to be educated in rural areas, why would I not make a very inexpensive device and project it onto a television screen? You know, very much like Apple does with their products. Everyone has a TV today. This thing won't take very much battery. A battery will come in very inexpensive, and I can project it on a bigger screen where learning will be much easier. You've got a speaker there already, so the cost effectiveness would be really good. But I think the problem of, and you know, from a functionality point of view, it's very doable. The cost point is very good. It can come to market very quickly. It'll have a large indigenous content over time. But unfortunately, kids today want the internet. They want, you know, the functionality that a smartphone or a tablet gives them. And so while this may do the job and do the job very effectively, it's unlikely to find a market because people are willing to pay more for some additional functionality that they may not need for this particular work, but it's something that I call it fashion. It's something that they want, and you know, you can't argue with the consumer. If that's what they want, that's what you have to give them. So, you know, when we talk about entrepreneurship and design for manufacturing, we need to keep all this in mind. And remember, just designing a product on a breadboard, making it work is not enough. When you design a product, you've actually got to look at the parts you're using. You've got to look at how old they are, how long they last, how quickly you'll have to change it, how upgradable it is. Are you giving something that is going to be replaced? Are you giving something that is going to be upgraded? You know, for example, and I'll talk electronic products because that's what I know. Are you going to add more memory to it? You know, again, today we get pre-packaged products because they're simpler to make in mass production and it's easy and there's enough market for everyone. But in the old days, you could choose how much memory you wanted. You could choose the kind of disk you wanted, and we could retrofit them into your product. You could take X amount of memory today and make it 2X tomorrow, and I could go in and put the DRAM chips. Most of the time, I could plug them into your product. Unfortunately, because costs are down today and margins are really tight, we are unable to, or we don't do that in electronic products. But you know, when you design your product, you got to keep that. You must keep that in mind. In fact, when we look at again, what has this pandemic done? It's I want everyone to have. I should be able to connect everyone to a doctor when they need to get connected with the doctor. And so, and the doctor is not going to just look at you on the phone and say, how are you feeling? He wants, today doctors want some basics. They want your temperature. They want, you know, some vitals, as we call them, for them to give you whatever advice or prescription or whatever they have to give you, even if it's on the phone, video, whatever. And so someone needs to look at a low cost device that will enable people to send their basics to a doctor. I think if someone had a product that gave me heart rate, respiration rate, and oxygen, I think from a COVID point of view, I would know, a doctor would know very quickly what to do or what to say to that person when they're there. So I can keep going on this basis, talk to you about a number of other products that people had developed from market, manufacturing, maintainability point of view. But I thought it's best to take questions. That way I'd be able to answer some specific queries that you might have. Professor Pal, back to you.
Yeah. So yeah, Arjun, we understand that the design or manufacturability is a concern, and of course the product has to have the options or the opportunities to get it upgraded in future, and then maintainability is also it should be a concern when the design of components are there. But the as a startup or entrepreneur, sometimes they face difficulty in having the proper market strategy, because unless they do it properly, they cannot compete with the bigger industries. So that's a real concern for us in the people who are there in India and want to build up a career, being an entrepreneur and startup. So what is your suggestion that what specific strategy they would like to take up for competing in the global market or competing with the bigger industries?
So, I would say very simply, there was a time when the market in India was not large enough. And so we had to understand the market, let's say in the US or in the Western world, to be able to make products and get any volume of them. Things have changed. I think the Indian market is now huge. I mean, my contention is, and I use the word a little loosely, that for infrastructure, education, and healthcare, India has infinite size markets right now. And I think the world will troop towards us in those areas because we have such a huge, huge demand. And so today you can design products for India. So you don't have to worry about understanding the US market or whatever. And if you design products for India, you will find that there are countries in Latin America, in Africa, and even in the US, there are parts of the US that would still be a market for you. But you don't have to depend on the US. I'm talking of products, I'm not talking of software right now. And so we need to look at our market, we need to understand it. We need to, you have to understand the market. I think from an IITian's point of view, most of us are fairly good from an engineering design point of view. We can make a product, but just making the product is not good enough. You need to understand the market, how and why people will use it. What is the competition? What is your value add? What is your differentiator? A lot of things that come in. And I would suggest that people either do market research. And my view is, I always tell people, work for a few years. Try and understand not just the market, but the processes in the market. I mean, people tend to forget how difficult it is to get payments out from not just private institutions, but even government institutions that seem to have the money. I mean, I'm sure at IIT, you are aware how many people would come to you and say, my payments got stuck, some process problem, et cetera, et cetera. So, you have to learn how to, and for startups, cash becomes the king. And you have to learn how to manage and work in that environment. Otherwise, you could get into a lot of trouble. You may have the best product, you may have a good market, but if you don't manage your cash, don't collect your monies, as I always tell people that everyone gets excited when they book an order. Booking an order is a cost element. Collecting the payment after you do the delivery is when you really make profit, right? So priorities have to change. And in India, you have to learn how to do it. People don't pay on time. It's just a mess. They'll always change the spec at the last minute, say that I wanted this, but you said this to me. And so our market is not that mature in the sense their processes, but the size is there. And it's starting to get a lot better than it was earlier, in all fairness. I mean, I'm being a little overtly, how should I put it, conservative here, so that entrepreneurs don't feel it's easy going there. But yes, I think, when I was in college, I think I was in a cocoon. I just didn't know the outside world and how it operated, especially the business world, because I came from a family where my mother was a doctor in a government medical college hospital. My dad was in the army. And so, in a way, I was protected. I had never really seen the business world at all. So when my 5 years in DCM were a great learning. I actually understood how that world worked. I understood what, from my point of view at least, what, just how that whole thing worked. So that when we started HCL, it wasn't a big shock. We were pretty prepared. We knew what it was. We actually were able to, one reason why we were able to work through it was that. And of course, there's always some bit of luck and timing. I think we came in when microprocessors were just starting. We were able to ride that wave. I think, in all fairness, our competition from the big multinationals at that time was they really didn't adopt to technology that quickly. The best example I can give today is publications. People who publish books. For them to go digital, most of the senior managers come from a printing or a publishing background. They don't come from a electronics or digital background. But the world is moving towards digital content for learning. It's being accelerated by the pandemic. And a lot of them are going to have to struggle to learn, to make that change, and to find a way of making money from digital content. Because unfortunately, or whatever way you look at it, people expect content to be free because I've got Wikipedia, I've got Google, there's so much content that's available free. So people expect content to be free, and they expect it to be available to them, at least in the US. We are seeing that kids want content. My one child wants to learn it with Lego characters. One wants to learn it with Marvel characters. One wants to learn it with Star Wars characters. But the same lesson I have to give in multiple content has to be in multiple animations with different characters. That costs a fair amount of money, but they all want it somewhat free. And that's it's something we have to all see how to handle, what to do. And I'm deviating completely. I just didn't want to get there, but that's the word. So my advice would be try and work for a few years, understand the environment that you're going to operate in, and then do what you need to do. But you have to do it fast. And now you can do it because there's VC money, there's stuff like that. Not like us, HCL, we had to, when we started the company, we put in 1,75,000 rupees. That was all the money we had, out of which 1,25,000 went to buy an office in Bombay because you couldn't work in Bombay without an office and no one was renting. So, a working capital was only 50,000 rupees technically for HCL when we started. And 10 years later, we were a pretty big company. We had 2,000 people, we were all over the country. We had a little sort of celebratory get together at the Lake Palace Hotel in Udaipur. And we were doing a little brainstorming there and a little introspection. And we discovered that in 1,25,000 investment in real estate in Bombay had given us a better return than the 50,000 that we had invested in the company. Those were different days, but that's how things work with those days. So yeah. I could go on the HCL story. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you had 5 more friends when you started from the garage operation to such a big, the conversion to a big company, for HCL. Who are the five more friends?
So Shiv Nadar, who was at one time chairman of our board at Kharagpur, Subhash Arora, who is now settled in Singapore, Yogesh Vaidya, who is the CEO for hospital in Gurgaon, Ajay Chaudhary, who ran HCL Information Systems for a long time. He is now retired, but working very closely with the government on some of their IT policies. And unfortunately, DS Pammi Puri, who passed away a couple of years ago. So yeah, that's the 6 of us.
In India, as you know, that the manufacturing industry, the revenue, the GDP grossly comes out of the MSME sectors. The MSME employment, 80% of the total employment in the manufacturing sector. but the MSME sector is still in the rudimentary stage. There is no such major transformation. Digital transformation has not taken place. So how do you foresee that the digital transformation, the modern concepts, the industry 4.0, how they should adopt, because they don't have the infrastructure at this stage. Everyone is pushing towards the industry 4.0.
So actually, it is starting to grow. Actually, people's ambition. Sorry, I beg your pardon. I think your voice just cracked. I couldn't get the question.
Yeah, sure.
Could you please repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, what should be the strategic move for the MSME sectors to adopt the digital transformation? Because they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the infrastructure, both the hardware infrastructures, the lack of knowledge, the human infrastructure is also there. So, the total upskilling, reskilling, infrastructural change, all these things need to take place to adopt that industry 4.0 in full swing. So how they should move? I mean, what should be their, the strategic move to adopt these things? Otherwise, they are unable to, compete in the global market, and they will be losing the global market unless they adopt these digital transformation or digital changes. So, what is your suggestions today?
So today, what's happening is, I think, obviously, we have to have physical infrastructure and a good supply chain to be able to manufacture efficiently and properly. Not only that, we also have to have our processes have to get streamlined. I have to get my customs not to look at everyone like they are cheating. They have to assume that everyone is being honest and catch the people who are cheating and be really tough with them. Otherwise, if you treat everyone like they're cheating, then you delay my clearance at customs for 15 days. I'm competing in a world where people are doing 1 hour, 2 hour of inventory, and with our interest rates being higher in India, that makes me completely uncompetitive. I think till now what has happened is we have differentiated our products by the software that we put in them that makes them different. So we have added functionality or differentiation in the embedded software or these application software that we have that makes our products different. I think we can do that in a lot of ways in the hardware itself. And again, I'll give you an example. When we started at DCM, we were making calculators. Everyone was making calculators. And a company like DCM with higher overheads, for me to compete on price with garage operations, which were our competitors at that time, was impossible. So what DCM did very smartly at that time, and I've got to acknowledge what they did, we set up a big R&D group. And basically, we looked at the market and found that a lot of people from Indian Agricultural Research Institute, et cetera, were doing statistical work. And, it's very complex when you have to press multiple keys to get an answer on a calculator, which has, basic functions. So what we did was we used to obviously design the printed circuit board and put the standard calculator chips on it. On a EPROM or a PROM, we wrote the programs for regression, mean, median, all the statistical stuff that's required, and integrated it with the calculator chip. So when we gave the calculator, we had keys out there, single keys that you could press for mean and median and stuff. And basically, my cost of doing that, material cost, was 60, 70, 80 rupees more. But my selling price was some 5,000-6,000 rupees more than a standard calculator. But because it was functionally so necessary and required by them, that's how we had a much larger sale than most of our competitors, and on what they called a proprietary article certificate. Now, we did that with PCs. Now, everyone knows PCs, so I'll come to that. When PCs first came to India, 80% of the application was simply Word and Excel. The Excel wasn't there, it was something called VisiCalc. So you did your Excel type work and you did your word processing type work. That was 80% of the application on the PC. And those of you who know PCs know that the Intel chip that was used was the 8088. But the 8088 was slower than the 8086 chip, much slower actually. So what we did was we again adapted the 8086 chip, put some microcode in that actually did Word and VisiCalc, the Excel and Word much faster, but it did only those two functions. It wasn't compatible with anything else. But since 80% of the market did that, for a 75 rupee add-on bill of material, we charged 10,000 rupees higher selling price. And we differentiated a commodity product. For a couple of years, till everyone wanted AutoCAD and they wanted all the other apps that were working, on the PC. And then that, what we call the Busy Bee 2, we had to scrap it because obviously it was not compatible. And so, when again, you look at manufacturing, design, and entrepreneurship, that's how I think that's how you have to look at your market.
Yeah, Arjun, there are some questions from the audience as well. How to convince people to get a product when people don't want to change the current traditional product. Sometimes, this is true. I mean, we have also observed that it's very difficult to convince people. So what is your opinion?
Yeah, so you got to look at what is your value add. Okay, it's got to be to convince people to change, to overcome that resistance to change. You have to have a great value add. And the best example I can give is all of you know something called work function. To get an electron to escape from its orbit, you've got to give it a certain amount of energy. That's called, and so the same thing is true when you want to change people's minds. And again, you've got to look at who is the person who will influence it. So different organizations have different decision methods. For example, when you go to a large organization, they have what I call adaptive planning. They make a budget. If you have a big investment, they have to put it in the budget, and then next year, when they have the budget, they'll make the investment. If you go to a MSME, most of them are more entrepreneurial mindset. There's one person who takes the decision. And so if you can get the quote unquote hot button, what is the problem that is giving him sleepless nights, and you can solve it for him, you'll get the sale. So again, I'll go back to our HCL days. There was a time when there was DCM who got back into computers, and there was a company called ORG, part of Sarabhai Group, that were making, microprocessor-based 8-bit machines. And all of us were selling about 200 machines a year. So we decided that, we wanted to do it different. We got one of our ex-employees who had gone off to do his MBA abroad. He came back and did a project for us. And he basically pointed out that there were 4 decision-making modes when people bought computers. And so we decided to go after the entrepreneurial mode, where decisions could happen very quickly. Most of them were first-time users. And so basically what we did was trained our salespeople to go out to the field and try and identify the one problem that people wanted solved. Sometimes it was scrap control, sometimes it was invoicing, sometimes it was a different thing. And that's the basis on which we sold. And I'll give you some examples that are somewhat humorous today, but got us sales. And you got to remember, computers were not cheap in those days. So my salary was 2,000 rupees a month. Our computer went out for 3,64,100. Okay, so just look at the range of difference. There was this small customer in Delhi, a company called Hilton Rubber in Connaught Place. And he had bought this computer, and I was a little worried that we might get a bad reference because it's a small company and he's spending so much money. I wonder what he's going to do with it. So I decided to go down and talk to him. So I talked to the owner and said, what are you planning to do with the computer? So he said, look, my competition is Dunlop and Madras Rubber Factory and all the big, manufacturers. I have 200 customers. and I want to just keep my 200 customers. I'm happy with that. If they stay with me, I'm okay. I will grow, I will, And so I said, but how did the computer help you? And so this is classic, what we today call CRM. We didn't know those words in those days. But he said, I will give you the information. I will tell you all my customers, his wife's name, kids' name, birthdays, anniversaries. He likes his coffee black with 1 sugar. He likes Chinese food. This is his favorite dish, whatever. I'll give you all that data. I want you to enter it on the computer. So when one of them comes to see me, I want to put his name in. I want to get all that in. So when he comes, I'll ask him, your anniversary, what happened, etc. I'll give him coffee exactly the way he wants. I'll, order the food at lunch exactly what he likes. That's really what I want to do with the computer. So I met him a few months later and said, what's your feedback? And he said the machine has paid for itself. And so, the salesman had to identify that was the need before he made the sale. I wasn't with the salesman, so I can't tell you how he identified it, but I can tell you after he'd done it, I went and met the client. We got a order from the chief minister of Punjab. And I was pulled in there because they wanted me to, not an order, there was interest from the chief minister of Punjab, and I was pulled in because they wanted me to give a presentation on computers in Punjabi. Now, it's very difficult when you say RAM, ROM, etc. in Punjabi. So after a while, there was not too much Punjabi I was using. I was talking mainly in English. So I asked him, what do you need a computer for? And his application was also very interesting. Again, CRM, but of a different kind. He said, when any of my MLAs comes into this office, from the door, he starts yelling that you never do anything for me, blah, blah, blah. This you have to do. He said, I'm always on the defensive. He said, what I want you to do is, again, I'll give you the information that this MLA asked for these 6 favors. This is what we did. This is what happened with them. So that when the guy walks in from the door and starts yelling, I enter his name. I get the background of what he had given me earlier, what favors he had asked for, etc. And now I'm the aggressor. I turn around and tell him, look, you 6 people you sent me, I got this guy in a job here, but he did nothing. He got thrown out after 6 months. And now I'm not going to take any more favors from you. Do any more favors for you. Right. Again, that was his application to handle it. Again, as I said, CRM are for different kind. So again, you have to, when you look at MSMEs, they are the easiest people to sell to because there's normally one person who takes the decision. And if you can identify that person and identify what's the problem, his big problem that's troubling him, and give him a solution. For most other companies, I would think that when you're doing a value add, most of the time it'll come down to some ROI, some rate of return, some financial benefit that the company would get, hopefully directly rather than indirectly. The best person to go to is the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, because he would understand immediately that you're saving them money and how you're saving them money. And then he will help you maneuver through the minefield that is in the company to be able to get your order. So it all depends on who is the person who's benefiting from what you're doing. And then you've got to go and make sure that that person or someone in that person's office becomes your champion. That's how you'll be able to sell. There's no other way you can sell.
Yeah. It's true, yeah. Sometimes the startup, they come up with idea and they know that the bigger market is there, but the bigger companies are also there. So to compete with them, so if they want to come up with a mass production, so they need the capital, they need the fund. So how to tackle difficult this situation, because unless I produce in a mass scale and reach to the market, I won't be able to the global competition. So, but I don't have the fund. So that sort of question is coming up in the mind of the scholars, students, interested in the entrepreneurship and the startup.
Yeah, so that's not necessarily true. You don't always need lots of money. You need a good differentiator. If you have a good differentiator, and remember, most companies that get large become slow. And so why do they buy startups? Is because they also realize that they have their pace at which they do their innovation. Most of them is at much slower pace than what people outside who are much more agile, smaller can do. And so you can always go in and improve products. I mean, there are lots of examples where you can do an add-on to something that's already there where you can sell. But do remember one thing, in my life, IBM has been our biggest competitor when we were in computers. And, as they used to say in the old days, that you can't lose your job if you buy from IBM. Okay. So an IBM strategy to get you out of the way was what we called FUD, F-U-D. They create fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Right? Doubt, will this company survive? Fear and uncertainty that you don't know if the product will work properly, they'll get service, what will happen. You have to overcome that. That's a part of what you've got to do in sales. It's just something you have to do. And if you're able to establish your niche, if you're able to establish customers who are using your product and are giving you good references, there's no reason why VCs will not come in and fund you. And you don't need lots of money to do things. I mean, everything has to start. Overnight, you can't. First of all, you can't recruit 200 people overnight and get things done. So everything has to be done at a certain pace that you've got to. The other thing I want to mention, especially to IITians, is that most of us are what we call CTOs. We are technology people. And a lot of time, you do need a CEO or a COO or someone who understands the market to come and run the company and grow it. Just because it's your invention and you've done it doesn't mean you'll be the best CEO. It doesn't mean you won't. But you do need to keep that in mind, that ultimately don't mix up power with achievement. If your job is to change the world, then you can do it by becoming a minister. You can do it by producing what is the best product that will make that difference. So you've got to I think I see this with a lot of people. Once the company starts to grow, all of a sudden, from being good technology people, suddenly it's important that I have so many people reporting to me. I want to sign all the checks. You have to avoid that. You have to decide what you want to do, what's going to make you happy, what your original and what your objective is. And for most entrepreneurs, the objective is to change the world, I presume, in some way when you start off. Just stay with that objective. I think it's very important. Try not to let power come to your head. It's always, I volunteered to come to the US because at one time I couldn't get onto a flight without someone asking me, recognizing me and saying who I was. And that's quite embarrassing. At least for me, it was embarrassing. And so I decided that at least when I come to the US, I'll be somewhat anonymous. And yes, in a way it's helped because it won't go to my head, hopefully, and it won't influence the way I look at things and what I do. That's me, but that's the advice that I give people who talk to me about it.
Excellent. Arjun, you have worked in India, you have worked in the US and all. So, what is your understanding, regarding the venture capital fund, the situations to attract the technocrats? So, how is the situation in India as compared to the US? How do you see that?
I think the situation, the situation in India is also quite mature now. They've been around for a while. People, I think what the VCs worry about more than ultimately they want to fund a group that has some kind of track record or individual that has some kind of track record and is transparent. One of the things they worry about is if people, how should I put it, this whole black money, taking cash out of the company, not being transparent. The VCs don't like that. Most of them, their reputation tends to get involved in something like that. And so that's why they like to prefer to go with people who come out of large corporations where they think they are more professional. I don't agree with them on that, but that's the way they tend to look at it because it's lower risk. But I think one of the things you have to learn to do is to try and run a transparent company. It allows your employees to feel good. It makes everyone feel that they know what's going on, and it has your investors also feeling comfortable with what you're doing. Now, startups can fail. Some startups do well, some startups don't do well. I think that's a part of, and VCs understand that. But they don't understand you're not being transparent. I think that's the key part. But I think the ecosystem in India is now quite robust, and there are a number of VCs that have been operating there for a long time. I don't see that as a problem today. Yes, your ability to raise money is a big question mark. You have to. I always tell people is that if it was your money, would you invest it? And if you would not invest, then how do you expect someone outside to invest? Right. So you got to look at what they're looking at. They're looking at, what are the risks? They're looking at, what are the exit? What is the market? How are you going to do it? I mean, you got to answer all those questions. And it's best to go to some people first, test out your hypothesis, get the questions that they're going to ask, firm up your what we call investment memorandum and your summary, and then go to the actual VCs you want to get the money from. Right. And you've got to be realistic of how you're going to do it, what you're going to do. And, you've got to remember one thing, and I hate to generalize this, but by and large, when you talk to VCs and PEs, they have only one God, which is that money and return. So don't expect them to have, quote, I mean, this is not for everyone, but a lot of them don't have, quote unquote, human feelings. They want their return. That's what they are paid for. That's their job. And that's how they look at it. And so just remember, keep that in mind. Don't expect them to be more flexible on other things. Yes, a lot of them have a heart. They work really well with you, but ultimately that's their driver. And that's what you've got to remember. Yeah, in the US, India is still not that sophisticated in terms of how we do our shares. In the US, for example, Series B could have 4 votes per share. So while they own 20% of the company, they might have 80% of the voting rights. So that's why they're called vulture capital at some stage, because, if the founder doesn't perform for 2 or 3 quarters, they replace the founder if they think the idea is good and you're not doing a good enough job on implementation. Right. That's one thing. The other thing I want to tell you about India is that there are millions of ideas in India. Ideas they're good, but they have little value. You have to show people your ability to execute. India, execution is the key. So, if you're looking at the Indian market, probably any market, India especially, remember execution is the key. You have to give them a comfort that you'll be able to execute. And it's unlikely that you're saying I'll be the first in the market is going to be good enough, because no one ever believes that someone coming in after you can't be more efficient than you. And so, just being first in the market is not good enough. You have to have either you're first in the market, you have lots of patent protection, then you have barriers to entry for someone to come in to your market, so to say. Then the VCs might feel comfortable. But otherwise, they want to look at how well you'll be able to execute. That's going to be the key.
Arjun, technology is moving so fast. The last 5 years, you have seen that so much of changes has taken place, starting from the design aspects to the manufacturing. In fact, the entire supply chain has adopted so many digital, the concepts and all. So what is your view? Like, in which direction manufacturing is going to after 10 years down the line. So where would be the what would be the situation, and what should be, as a the academician, the scholars, what should be their approach to work with the industries?
So, the best analogy I can give there is medicine. From generalized medicine, we are now starting to go to what we call personalized medicine. Everyone is now saying, hey, I'll match your specific DNA to the medicine you want. And, I'll individualize the medicine rather than buying it off the shelf. I will make a cocktail that's specific for you. And over a period of time, that's where medicine is going to go. And we all know that. Some of us feel very good that, hey, they're going back to, we were doing this in India thousands of years ago. So in a way, you're going back with more technology, but you're going back to the same concept. I think manufacturing is going to go to the same way. I think they talked about it in cars already, that you could design a specific car, and it would get made for you. I think it's going to happen in nearly every product, right? And the challenge then becomes that I have multiple individual products, but I have to make them maintainable so that I can maintain them over a period of time. And I think if you're saying where I think, and I'm not an expert, but where I think manufacturing is going to go, it's going to go in that direction. And especially large consumer durables like cars and stuff are going to get, I mean, obviously the body and all right now will stay what it is, but internally, whatever the fittings are, whatever the add-ons are, whatever there is, which engine I'll put in, etc., can become customized. And so I will be able to go to a shop, look at a holistic model, go to a dealership, look at a holistic model, design what I want with all the variables that are available, the color, the blah, whatever, and then give the order. They'll give me a price. I'll confirm that it's acceptable, whatever the payment, their credit checks or whatever. I'll give the order. They'll give me a time frame when they'll deliver it, and that car will be delivered to my home. That's how I think it's going to happen in the automotive industry.
Yeah, it's true, because the customization is coming up in a big way. But the most challenges would be for the manufacturing industries to take up those orders, different customized products, and make a proper planning for that. Yeah. So yes, we are almost. Yeah. So we are almost at the.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. We are at the end. I mean, it's the time is almost up. So, Arjun, the last one question. You are at the top of the success, and what is the mantra? I mean, how did you achieve all this?
I don't know. If I knew, I'd write a book and tell everyone. I don't know. But what I'd like to tell people is, I mean, I look back and now, I've been in this industry now 50 plus years. I look back and look at what am I, how do I put it? My biggest asset, my biggest thing is my friends are still the same from school and college. They're still my friends. And so I've been very careful to keep myself exactly the same so that I don't lose them or lose the bond I have with them. And I think that's the most important thing. It's something that I think I would encourage everyone to try and practice. We tend to let things go to our head at times. We tend to think of ourselves as better, different, whatever. That's not necessarily true. That's one thing I learned at IIT was how to survive in a world with people who are smarter than me. And when you go out in the world, that's also true. There are lots of people who are smarter than you, and if you don't believe it, then you're absolutely wrong. And the other thing is you have to learn how to work with them. Try and find them and work with them, because they will make you look good. I've worked with some very, very smart people, and it's nice to see a lot of them today heading up IT companies in India and overseas. And so, that gives me a lot of satisfaction that we were able to identify people who had the potential and have now grown. I think there are at least 20 companies, some large multinationals, where people who worked with us in HCL for a while are now the CEOs, and have retired as CEOs. And so, if you build a team, work with a team, you can't do it all yourself. So, if you're wanting to be an entrepreneur, try and find a team, try and make sure that there's a chemistry, that you get along. One piece of advice, if you're married and some of your team members are married, please make sure the spouses get along also, because that takes care of a lot of, it gives you a lot of support over time, because they support each other, because you'll be working long hours as the company does well, or goes through whatever rough periods or good periods. And so at home, you got to make sure that that is not a place that creates problems, and they then support each other, and that becomes really, really useful. That's my experience in HCL, that 6 of us worked together. I think we stayed together for 19 years, which is a long time by most standards for a team to stay together, especially, say, a big team, especially in an environment in India where brothers fight with brothers over financial stuff. So, just those are what I looked at and what worked for us, and it's probably worked for most people. So I just wanted to mention that, hey, if you're becoming an entrepreneur, it's a long journey. Yes, technology is changing very fast. If you get into this whole field of electronics and IT, just remember, you have to keep learning your whole life. I guess that's true in nearly every field, but especially so in this field. And so at least 10-20% of your day, please devote it to updating yourself. Just getting to know what's new, understanding it. You don't have to be an expert on everything, but you have to have a basic level understanding of what's going on, because tomorrow you've got to take decisions in terms of technology and directions and trends. And if you don't have that knowledge, you're completely dependent on someone else, which doesn't give you a comfort feeling, especially if you're an entrepreneur. Okay.
Excellent. Yeah, Arjun, keeping aside your, the successful professional career, could you please let us know about your journey towards founding the SpeakMake?
So yes, that's actually the real person behind SpeakMake is Kiran Seth, who's actually a batchmate, mechanical engineering, Professor B.R. Seth's son, who was with us at IIT. So Kiran came back. He did his PhD at Columbia. He came back to India, and he was one of the first people I know who gave up his U.S. Citizenship and became an Indian citizen. And we were sitting one day. It just he had got some friends of his. There was another colleague of his, someone he knew from Columbia, a guy called Mahendra Mallu, who was managing director of Haryana Breweries, and Bobby Barwa, who was, I think, president of Hindu College. And Kiran had come, and they were sitting in my mother's house in winter in the lawn outside in the sun, and Mahendra Mallu had got a crate of Rosy Pelican beer. So we were all having beer and talking, and the topic, we used to have a lot of debate topics in our time. The topic came up that, Western pop culture and Indian culture, and somehow that became a discussion. And we all sort of zeroed in on the point that, we are losing, our youth are losing because they haven't been exposed to our culture, our music and art, that they're losing their connection with basic Indian culture. And so we said, we should do something about it. And so I took out some Oxford sheets, remember those Oxford sheets? And we wrote down the objectives of what we're going to do, and said, let's start a organization. And we couldn't think of a name. So the objectives of the organization became the name, Society for the Promotion of Indian Classical Music and Culture Amongst Youth. And that's SpeakMake. That's how it started. And so I'll give you another story connected with that. Initially, we needed a little publicity. So HCL used to do a lot of advertising. The first Monday of every month, we used to take a full page advertisement in every major newspaper in India. Deccan Herald, Deccan Tribune, every newspaper. So we had a massive advertising budget. So I talked to the advertising agency and said, look, out of whatever they make 17% or some 15%, some amount, said, I need a 1 column centimeter ad on the third page of Hindustan Times or whatever, Times of India, which said, say, Debu Chaudhary is performing at Lady Shri Ram College on this date at this time, and just have a small courtesy Hindustan Computers Limited. And at the same time, we had started something in Singapore where basically we were selling a solution with the computer. So they would capture the specs, send it to us in India. We would then do the programming here and send it back to them. This is in 1980. We called it Software Export Division, SED, and we started it in Madras, now Chennai, because Singapore Airlines had 3 flights a week between Madras and Chennai, and floppies could go up and down. That's how the whole thing was done. Now, unfortunately, software was considered a trade. It wasn't considered an industry, which meant that the Software Export Division, which was on Haddows Road in Madras, came under the Shops and Establishments Act. It didn't come under the Companies Act. So we had to maintain these 12 registers and all, which we weren't used to because we were used to the Companies Act. We were a company. So Shiv Nada said that he knew the people in Tamil Nadu and that he would lobby the government and the IS there to get software recognized as an industry. And that took us 5-6 months. And then one day he comes and says, he asked me, what is this picnic? So I thought, oh, he's found out that I'm getting these little ads done in the newspaper. So I sort of told him, I told him, yeah, we're doing something, but I asked him, why are you asking? So he said, we just got software cleared as an industry. He said, how did it happen? He said, because these people from Tamil Nadu saw this Picnic ads, which is sponsored by Hindustan Computers Limited. They said, oh, if you're doing that, then the company has a soul. So we will take your word for it. So actually, Picnic is sort of indirectly responsible for us recognizing software as an industry. It would have got done ultimately, but at that time, that was...
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Arjun. I mean, it's a wonderful experience for all of us to hear from you. And I'm pretty sure that one question came up from Debroy. Let me see what is that question last. Sir, on a similar vein, what has been your experience of mentoring the entrepreneurship cell? Sure, it will be as successful as your other ventures. Yeah.
Yes, mentoring people, when you talk of mentoring a cell, see, mentoring a company is one thing, mentoring a group, then all you have to do is really motivate them to find their passion. Really, an entrepreneur has to have a passion for what he or she is doing. If you have that passion, 2 things, it may or may not be successful, but at least you'll be happy doing what you're doing and you'll enjoy doing it. Exactly. And I think that's the most important thing. Exactly. Success and failure comes to everyone. Everyone goes through those cycles. But you have to like what you're doing. You have to enjoy it. Because if you do that, then you're a much better person for your family, for everyone around you. And, that's the most important thing. So when I talk to groups, or when you, as you said, mentored the entrepreneur cell, that's the message I would like to give them and say that, look, and the other thing I always say is that don't start a company to make money. That's the worst reason for starting a company. You start a company to change the world, to make a difference, to do something. You'll find that as you get successful, money becomes less important, but it is available for you. I'll get into trouble, but I'll give you the example I normally give, is that money is like girls. If you run after them, they'll run away from you. So you just have to do what you want to do. Your passion, make a difference, and you'll find that it'll become financially much more comfortable.
I mean, it's absolutely true. I mean, the one has to be passionate about his or her own work, and then only the success will automatically fall, and the rest of the things will come up.
Yes,
Thank you,
no,
Arjun. I did not take up.
yeah, you've got to
I
be
love-
passionate, not just as an entrepreneur. Even if you're working in a company, you have to be
Exactly.
passionate. You
Exactly.
have to do the
Exactly.
best. You have to, how do I put it? You have to put your best foot forward. I think that's one thing I learned at IIT. I credit IIT for that, is that I try to be, well, I won't use the word a perfectionist, but I try to do the best I can in whatever
Exactly.
I do. Otherwise, I don't do it. You know, you can't do everything, but don't do something half-hearted. Just
Yeah,
don't do
exactly. So if you take up a job, you have to put your best effort in it. That's all. Yeah. Thank you so much, Arjun. I mean, I will not take much of your, it's already more than an hour, and we kept on talking, discussing, interacting. So it's 9:40 in our time. So thank you so much once again for your presence. We are really happy to have you today, and we'll look for these sort of interactions in future as well.
Thank you, Professor Paul, and thank you, everyone. And I'm sorry for keeping everyone up late. Thank you.
No,
Bye.
no, they have all enjoyed. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Arjun. Yeah.
Bye.
So Anantar, please let us know about the speakers for the next few weeks. Yeah, so next week would be again the technical topic, the additive and smart manufacturing by Dr. Murmu from CSIR, CMERI Durgapur. And then next week would be November 13th by Professor John Norris, recent advances in gas shielded arc welding. And then in the Professor Girish Chaudhary from UIUC, robotics and artificial intelligence, and George Vanderboot on metallographic practices in welding. All the webinars that we have already conducted are available through scanning this the code, and it is also there in the YouTube. Thank you so much for all of your presence, and we look forward to see you virtually in the next Saturday. The same time, 8:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Thank you so much.